Alan, thank you so much for these thoughts and words. There are two things that come to my mind right away, and that is that when I first came on board with ASTC, someone told me about a survey that suggested that the trust rating for science centers is in the neighborhood of 92%. That basically people who go to science centers expect to be getting fact. And that gets tougher and tougher, of course, as the issues get more and more challenging. How to stay in that trust space is really important. But what you need to know, and I'm sure you do, is that we are trusted spaces. So bringing programs and activities into our environment, I think, is a good, solid, objective one. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that in the category of oversimplification, when we were working on developing the Youth Inspired Challenge, we had a discussion with our colleagues at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and they gave us a sort of oversimplified chart that was in the form of an X, and basically what it said was, where knowledge is low but interest is high with regard to science, we have a tragic situation, and our school systems need to help bring that knowledge level up to that interest level. Where knowledge level is high and interest level is low, that is an equal tragedy. And there's a whole wide community, including our own science centers, that need to do more and more to get that interest level up there to match those capabilities. Well, this is truly an oversimplification, because what gets in the way here are not just how much do you know and how interested are you, but where do these core values come into play? How are you influenced by others and what they think about the process? So we have to be in that business of raising knowledge and raising interest at the same time, but doing it in a way that is holistic in its approach, that it does bring together all of these values and all of these systems that have been discussed here. So I'm delighted by the fact that the partnership between our organizations is designed to get at these very thorny issues. And the beneficiaries of that are going to be the science centers and the publics that they represent. So I want to thank you for your commitment to this. And certainly ASTC stands ready to work with you as closely as we possibly can. We have a few minutes, and I wanted to give folks an opportunity if they had a question or two that they wanted to ask Alan along the way. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Alan, I have a question. Do you give this talk to scientists as well as science centers?
I do. A different version of it. You may not believe this, but in spite of my personality, I never give the same exact talk twice. I look like I do.
What is the response of scientists when they,
Absolutely, we're with you. That'll be great. I'd like you to meet my friend who's interested in this stuff. It depends. It's heavily dependent, seriously, on age. It really is. Younger, so I grew up. You did science because it was interesting and provocative. If you admitted that you did it because you thought it was useful, you were bad. And, I studied the hormonal basis of mood and the hormonal basis of aggression and submission. Every time I published a paper, it was in a newspaper, I was considered to have sold out by talking to the press. That is totally changed. Young scientists won't publish in Science magazine if they don't think their mother will see them in the New York Times. And they like doing it. They like showing that it's, I love this, by the way, because I foolishly always thought, society supports science because it's good for society and therefore we have an obligation to share it. Well, younger scientists like it and they want to do it. So they like it, they come up to me, say, what can we do? And Tiffany's training programs are amazingly popular. They're sold out every time she goes on a major university campus. So they're receptive to it, but they got to do it. And their bosses have to help them get tenure in spite of doing it, because that's a tough issue. That really is. Yeah?
Alan, in Australia recently, a study showed that about $12 billion a year is spent doing science and $300 million a year spent communicating science. How do we help rebalance that equation so that perhaps more of the funding is spent where it's actually useful in terms of building a relationship between science and society, which in turn then feeds back into the funding for research?
So the situation in the United States is much worse. Much worse. Very little money is spent on real communicating science, and our science journalism community is at terrible risk, terrible peril, as every major newspaper in the United States is killing its science section. But, and I don't really know how to fix it. I do feel some optimism, maybe misplaced, that two things will affect it here. One is that NSF is getting under a lot of pressure to do better. Not necessarily to do more, but to do better. Some of the pressure is from the board, some of it is from the Congress. We can keep that pressure up. The other is that Francis Collins, the new director of the National Institutes of Health, is actually one of the best public communicators in the world, has incredible science credentials, and loves doing it. And I and other people have been trying to get him to get NIH into, you know, they think they do it because they have a blood pressure campaign, or they think they do it, but it's not quite the same thing. Some institutes have been working on it. Of all things, the Genome Institute are really experts, and they spend serious money on public engagement activities. I just noticed that Heart, Lung, and Blood has been doing some things. So there's some movement, but pressure. We need pressure. We also need to demonstrate that we're good at it. And I think working together we can do that. I was very cynical and pessimistic about the scientific community until more recently, where I think that particularly younger scientists really love doing it. And because they like it, they'll start doing it. And if we all do it, and you know, we've editorialized in Science about it, and I don't know, I'm hoping, but I may be Pollyanna-ish, but yeah.
If younger scientists are more
You have to yell, because people want.
If younger scientists are more interested in doing this, have you been able to put your finger on perhaps what has turned the corner a little bit in this? What is this particular generation of scientists, young scientists, students, what affects? Is it you know, Generation X or?
I don't really know, because I don't know.
Maybe we should try to find out.
Yeah, yeah. I do know though that, I mean, all of the data are pretty clear that they like it, and that their mentors didn't. You know, they really didn't value it. Certainly my mentors, whoa, they thought it was just bad. Don't do it. Yeah.
Now, can I ask you, it's related to that, is there, what do you think about the substitution of the actual scientist? If it's not a scientist, but it is communication via other media, it's internet activities, it's you know, social media tools, is there a way that you raise confidence in science other than putting the scientists themselves in that position? Or are we actually damaging through those processes?
It depends. It's unfortunate that scientists are also people. So we have a public engagement program called the Dialogue on Science, Ethics, and Religion that most people don't know about. But it's the epitome of public engagement, and the goal from our perspective is to bring science to the religious community and to find ways that we can work in common ground. And I get the nastiest emails from my colleagues about the fact that we do it. You know, why aren't you writing off the... So, it depends on the mechanism. And social, you know, social networking is dangerous. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. The first Huffington Post blog that I did was on science and evolution and religion. And I got 900 comments. Most of them wishing me, you know, a life in hell, you know, that my body would fall apart and that I would die, and it was from scientists. It was not from the, I was mortified when I saw this. So I do think it's an upward battle. I don't know the best vehicles, and by the way, anybody has any ideas for what we should be doing in this partnership, please, brock@astc.org or Leshner@AAAS.org. I actually read my emails unless we spam you. And we would very much welcome any ideas that anybody has, and Tiffany will be here for the rest of the meeting. I have to go back and give a speech in a school in Baltimore at 9 o'clock Monday morning. What else?
Alan?
We have 2 minutes. Yeah, I can't see, but yeah.
Dave Shedroff.
Hi, David.
Why don't we get a little bit more formal on this? And does it make sense to get a task force from AAAS and from Aztec and just get some people taking some of the best practices? Because we've got bits and pieces of this around. And I'm always a firm believer in go with the early adopters. Don't try to turn over people who aren't going to be inclined. But, we've got 50, 60 undergraduate and graduate students in labs of the university that work out of our place. When I ask them what they're doing there, because it's many more than they had on campus when they had the labs on campus, they said, because we get to interact with the public. So I think, we're not unique in that. But I think if we got some people together from both sides of the fence, rather than just kind of throwing it out there, I think it'd be much better served to try to at least get some concrete examples and maybe take a look at this holistically, I love that word, and see if we can start to get some movement and then celebrate those early successes, and then that tends to give us a momentum going.
You know, thanks, David. I have to tell you that Tiffany's counterpart on our staff, who is heading this partnership, is Margaret Glass. That would be mglass@org. And we are just in the process of developing a relationship that's built around exactly these kinds of points. We need to look at what's working and where we want to go from there. And the point that you're raising, and I've seen this in several of the science centers that I've visited, I find absolutely fascinating. This idea of bringing the research scientist literally into the science center environment and have this process observed, I find fascinating, because all sorts of things have to work in that regard. First of all, it is research, so there can be failures going on before the public. Maybe they don't realize it, but there can be failures going on at the same time, and there needs to be real-time explanation as part of that process. I find it to be fascinating when I see science centers taking on that kind of a literal, one-to-one relationship with the research community. We're going to be doing more and more of that. It's great stuff, right behind the plexiglass.
So the other thing I learned today is that there are a bunch of networks that are starting based in various science centers. Museum of Science in Boston has a couple of them that are working on these kinds of issues. And if we can aggregate these networks in some kind of a way, we've got another tool that we can use. I think it's the genuine commitment, and I'm telling you that the scientific community will respond, maybe not in billions of people, but we'll get a critical mass to respond if we can figure out the vehicles to do it. We only have 130,000 individual members and access to 260 other scientific societies. If I can't deliver some scientists, there's something wrong.